Good morning, Boker Tov, buenos dias, sabah al khair. This is Shanna Fold here with the Israel Daily News Podcast. I'm here to give you the headlines so you can get caught up quickly. You're listening, so you're already on top of your game. Survive and thrive, people. Knowledge is the best weapon. Today is Tuesday, December 15th, 2020. Which means that we are on our 6th day of Hanukkah. Happy Hanukkah, everybody. Now, let's get to the news. Rumor has it that Israel is currently, as we speak, receiving a delegation of diplomats from an unknown or unnamed Muslim country. The news comes out from Israel Hayom's reporter, who says that if he could report which country was making the visit, jaws would drop. Well, this is very exciting. There have been a slew of normalization deals that came out between Israel and Arab Muslim countries. That includes the United Arab Emirates, the Kingdom of Bahrain, Sudan, and Morocco. Who is next? Well, Donald Trump told reporters some weeks ago that there would be a dozen Arab countries to come out with normalization deals with Israel. If I had to guess which jaw-dropping Arab country was making a visit to Israel right now, I would guess Saudi Arabia, because that would be a big jaw-dropper. A delegation of U.S. diplomats led by current White House senior advisor Jared Kushner is planning a trip to Morocco next week, following news of normalization between Israel and that Arab country. An Israeli delegation, of course, will be joining the Americans, and they will be flying in the first ever direct commercial flight from Tel Aviv to the nation's capital, Rabat. Last night, delegation members from the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain visited the Western Wall to participate in the candle lighting ceremony for the 5th night of Hanukkah. The group was made up of social activists and opinion leaders from the Gulf countries. The chief rabbi of the Western Wall, Rabbi Shmuel Rabinovich, called it a Hanukkah miracle to see the delegation participating in the candle lighting ceremony. On Sunday, President Reuven Rivlin hosted the delegation at his home in Jerusalem. Prime Minister Netanyahu appoints the next Mossad agency chief. His name hasn't been publicized yet, but he has years of experience in the spy agency, as he was the deputy chief and now will become the director. Because the current government is a unity government with the Likud and blue and white parties working side by side, the decision was supposed to be taken together. But Netanyahu went ahead and made the appointment without Defense Minister Gantz' approval or knowledge. According to the newspapers, Gantz, who was supposed to be the next prime minister in the rotation, is not happy about the call. A 76-year-old man entered an Israeli hospital early today and shot his wife, then turned the gun around and killed himself. The woman had been in the neurosurgery ward at the Asaf Harofeh Medical Center in the center of Israel for a number of days. She was suffering from a terminal illness while there. Reports say the man was a licensed gun owner. The patient, in a bedroom on the other side of the wall, was lightly injured when the bullet passed through the drywall and skimmed his leg. I'm going to take a moment away from the news to ask you to support this show. You can send over a monthly contribution if you're enjoying this report and if you think it brings you value. There's a link in the show notes where you can send a $5 or $10 monthly contribution to support the work that goes into this show. I really believe that it's a service to the people. The site is anchor.fm/Israel Daily News /support. You can also refer this show to 2 friends or leave a review on it on Apple Podcasts. That would be great. There are a few reviews there. I would love to see you continue to add reviews. The show currently has a 5-star rating, so I hope we can keep it up. Thank you. Now, let's get back to the news. Here's some news for Olim Chadashim, or new immigrants. anyone who might be planning to move to Israel. According to an international 2020 cost of living report, Israel has ranked 7th out of 208 cities on the list of most expensive cities for expatriates to live in, following closely behind Zurich and London. Other cities that ranked above Israel include Hong Kong, Tokyo, New York, and Geneva. Interestingly enough, the country dropped 2 places during the pandemic, but day-to-day expenses like groceries, rent, and transportation are still higher than countless other cities. Another statistic from this year listed Israel as the second most expensive country to buy a home in. The cost is upwards of $9,780 per square meter. Around 4:30 in the morning, a 3.8 magnitude earthquake struck Jordan, approximately 19 kilometers or 12 miles outside of Eilat. The Israel-Jordan border runs along the Syrian-African rift. While Israel has seen at least 3 minor earthquakes in the area within the last year, the last major earthquake occurred in 1927, and it was a magnitude of 6.2, killing 500 people and injuring 700 more. Residents of the city reported that while buildings shook, luckily there were no injuries or damage this time. A Times of Israel writer wrote up a blog post urging Israeli officials to invest even more than they already do into civil engineers who could help this small country prepare for an earthquake, which scientists say is inevitable. And finally, an Israeli company called Netafim has developed a drip irrigation system for growing rice that is much more sustainable than traditional methods. This system will replace the flooded paddies that have supplied the world with rice for generations, but cause a lot of damage to the environment. Rice is the staple food for more than half the global population, but its cultivation uses around 40% of the world's fresh water sources and is responsible for 10% of man-made emissions of methane, which is a greenhouse gas. Decades ago, Netafim pioneered drip irrigation to grow food in Israel's tough, dry, challenging landscape. Now, the company has just finished a pilot using its technology on about 2,470 acres of rice fields in locations throughout Europe and Southern Asia. Demand for rice is expected to rise by 25% by 2050. All right, well, that's it for today's news. Today is Tuesday, December 15th, 2020. Tel Aviv has a low of 15 degrees Celsius and a high of 19 degrees. That's 59 degrees Fahrenheit for the low, going up to 67 degrees for the high. Subscribe to the Israel Daily News Podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you're hearing it from. I am everywhere. Thank you, Candace Cohen, Jack Meltzner, and Orion Fitlovich for their contributions to the research, writing, and ideation. I'll send you off today with a new song from Ronen Topper. He just released it today, and he came straight to us at the Israel Daily News Podcast and asked us to have a listen. We loved it. Here's Ketseva Hashani, or Scarlet in English. It's a song about yearning and longing because love is still there, but with the understanding that it won't return. Have a happy Hanukkah and a great and productive day.
כמו שערה במדבר עבר כמעט את הכל.